import embeds.
President Trump in the Oval Office there has signed a proclamation just minutes ago imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. He addressed a number of topics during that event. Senior White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich has details live from the North Lawn, and in much the same way, the news flows every day like this. Good evening, Jackie.
Good evening, Brett. Yeah, the president just signed a litany of executive orders and proclamations. The biggest one was that 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports. No exceptions. The White House says that U.S. allies have been evading tariffs by sending relabeled
Sometimes my sound went down.
Through product exclusions and alternative agreements. So this ends all of that. Most steel and aluminum imports come from Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. During the president's first term, he imposed similar tariffs, but he did grant exemptions to those three countries. And some experts think a deal might be ahead, especially with respect to Canada. That's where the U.S. gets 70% of its aluminum, and the president once again said tonight that Canada should become a 51st state, and then it would face no tariffs. The president also signed a proclamation related to the Foreign Practices Act, which bans bribery of foreign officials. The order directs DOJ to pause enforcement to avoid putting U.S. businesses at a disadvantage over foreign competitors. And then he signed an order on paper straws, as he promised in his interview with you, Brett, saying nobody likes paper straws, so the federal government procurement is going to go back to plastic. He made dozens of sub-cabinet level and ambassador appointments, and he pardoned former Illinois Governor Blagojevich, who served 8 years in prison for trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat. Trump commuted his 14-year sentence back in 2020. Then he got into the questions with reporters, and when he was asked about Hamas delaying this weekend's planned release of 3 hostages, Hamas accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire agreement, President Trump said all of these hostages must be released on Saturday, or he will urge Israel to call off the ceasefire and all hell will break out. He said he expects his plan for Gaza to move forward with the help of Middle Eastern countries like Egypt and Jordan. Listen.
Folks in Jordan have expressed opposition to taking in more Gazans, more Palestinians. How do you want to convince him to do otherwise?
I think he'll take. I mean, I do think he'll take it. I think other countries will take also. They have good hearts.
Finally, we had some news today on the release of the JFK assassination files. On Friday, the AG and DNI offices presented their plan to the president to release those files and disclosed that some 2,400 previously unknown of files were uncovered by the FBI as a result of the president's day one executive order. They were never vetted by the review board or the National Archives. So awaiting a plan, and we'll see the rest of that come out, Brett.
Okay, we'll follow it all. Jackie Heinrich live in the North Lawn. Jackie, thank you.
Thanks.
As far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock.
Well, a deadline there. That's from the Oval Office minutes ago. Let's bring in our panel. Fox News Chief Political Analyst Britt Hume, Andy Linsky, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and Josh Kraushaar is a Fox News Radio political analyst. Britt, first of all, your overall assessment. You listened to 34 minutes of that interview and what he's saying today. What was the big takeaway for you?
Well, I thought we said a little of the old Trump, and he was still defending his first-term record, and some of the new Trump as well. And I thought it was an interesting interview, and I think you were up against the thing that anybody who ever speaks to him is up against these days, and that is the fact that no sooner do you finish your interview than he's talking to the press again at length and making more news. So here we are now with the 25 and 30% or 30% tariffs on those two countries, which make news. And go to your question, Brett, which he really did duck about, when the situation when prices might start to get better with in his administration, and he basically started talking about how rich we're going to be, and he ducked the question. But I think that as we look ahead here, yes, these actions he's taken so far are widely approved of, but if sooner or later the price decreases and the inflation reduction that he promised doesn't start to happen, patience may begin to wear thin.
Yeah, and we got a little bit more detail on his thoughts about Gaza. And today, minutes ago in the Oval Office, he said if Egypt and Jordan didn't help take refugees, that maybe the U.S. would stop aid to those countries. It's, it's painting a picture here of something happening that maybe leaders in the Middle East are reacting to every day.
Yeah, I mean, the president's pronouncements about Gaza and Israel have been a sort of major shift from the last administration, and they've been, sort of head snapping for Americans. As this was not necessarily something that he spent a lot of time campaigning on. One of the things that I thought was so interesting about your interview was the extent to which Trump, he's been a politician for 10 years, but he really still does bring this sort of developer businessman view to government. When he was talking about whether it was drug prices or whether the debt ceiling, the tax bill, he had an openness to working with Democrats and, kind of pivoting away from the old ways in which Washington has worked. So, I found, the more we hear about that, I think the more American people are interested in that strain.
Yeah, foreign policy, obviously, we talked a lot about that. He might be meeting with President Zelensky from Ukraine, he said today, next week, Josh, and kind of laid out the picture that he thinks there's a deal in a number of different foreign policy hotspots.
Yeah, I mean, I think President Trump views himself as the ultimate deal maker. He's talked tough at times. He hasn't rushed to accommodate Putin, as some of his critics have said, but he actually wants to kind of get some natural resources from Ukraine, and he's thinking outside the box. We saw sort of that type of thinking when he commented last Tuesday about the situation in Gaza. This is a very outside the box thinker. I think this was a president that you saw enjoying this political honeymoon, issuing these executive orders, talking extensively about America's role on the world stage, and he's someone who may be dealing with some hiccups in the weeks to come. But this is someone whose job approval at over 50% in the CBS News poll this weekend shows that this is a president who feels confident and is eager to get things done.
All right, panel, stand by if you would. We'll have more with the panel reaction after a quick break. There is a private jet that veered off the runway, crashed into a business jet. We're told at least one person has died, others injured. Getting some more information from the FAA, but again, that's Scottsdale, two private jets colliding. We'll continue to monitor that as well.
I think reciprocal tariffs, I'll be talking about it. I think probably on Monday or Tuesday I'll have a whole big thing. We have a very sophisticated plan. I want to have tariffs separately from that on steel, on autos, on semiconductors and chips, and probably pharmaceuticals.
And you're not worried that any of that's going to go back to the consumer?
It might, but it's ultimately going to be much less expensive.
And we're back with the panel. Britt, that is the economic test ahead of how this is going to play out with the population.
Yeah, exactly, Brett. And I'm so glad you asked him that, because, you also got into the question of what we're going to be able to do about the looming crises with our entitlement programs and with the size of this debt. And in the end, he said, we can do all these things and we're going to make it up with tariff money. Which says to me, at least, that the tariffs are not simply going to be a means to the end of negotiation for some better trade terms here and there, but are going to be a main source of revenue for this administration. And if you're imposing tariffs for those reasons, you're going to end up, there's no doubt that tariffs in the short run, and perhaps very much so in the long as well, raise prices. And this is a president who's committed to bringing them down. So I think there's a real challenge there.
Annie, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that is one of the central tensions of this Trump 2.0 administration. He made some news last night on tariffs. On Air Force One, he sort of announced that he'd do these 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. And then when he was talking to you, he referenced the pharmaceutical industry, the chips industry. I mean, these are all areas that Americans rely heavily on all of these goods and are used to paying a certain price. So if we are looking at a scenario where that price is going to go up, I think he is going to, be heading straight into a wall of consumer discontent. So it's something to look at. But I will say the early moves that he's made, particularly with Doge, are things that are popular in the United States. It's
very popular.
He's getting a lot of support.
Josh, politically, I asked that question about the heir apparent and whether he thinks J.D. Vance would be the 2028 nominee. And basically his answer was too early. There's lots of people who are capable, but he's very capable.
Yeah, Donald Trump does not want to give up the spotlight. He doesn't want to talk about 2028. Usually if you're a second-term president and you can't run for re-election, you start out as a lame duck. But this is a very unique second-term presidency where Donald Trump, I thought it was interesting that he said he didn't understand, or he's from New York and didn't fully understand Washington, D.C. He understands the levers of government now, and he knows how to use them. I think there's a lot of political opportunity. There's a lot of significant policy changes that are going to be taking place. We're seeing that with Doge. I think the challenge that Trump is going to face, and Elon Musk is going to be a central player in this, is how much does Doge end up cutting, and does it affect a lot of spending that actually benefits a lot of Americans, especially when it comes to the Defense Department.
And Britt, I tried to get into the weave there, tried to get back into the conversation.
He said he liked weed. At one point, to add to what Josh said, the president is being enormously benefited at the moment by the fact that the Democrats are rising to the bait on these things, which the president is doing, which are really quite popular. I think it's foolish on their part. They ought to wait till something like higher prices come along and they'd have a real opportunity. So far, they're making a mistake.
Well, panel, thank you for
That's right.
digesting that.
Big
with
mistake.
us. I appreciate it.
Making themselves look foolish.
Finally, tonight, a special day.
Listen, he brought it over. It's like you could just put your hand through the fence and just, my God, it's so shiny. It's so real. It's so amazing.
The Eagles have landed back in Philadelphia after winning Super Bowl 59 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Players receiving a hero's welcome by adoring fans this afternoon. Of course, it comes after the major celebrations last night in Philadelphia. City crews working late to clean up the streets. A parade for the Super Bowl champions will take place this Friday. Congratulations to the Eagles. Tomorrow on a special report, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth heads to NATO, his first foreign trip. We've got you covered. Fair, balanced, and still unafraid. Thanks for tuning in tonight. The Ingram Angle is now.
Oh, Elon Musk is one too.
Every time you hear Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, you just remember it is the Department of Government Evil. This will be a congressional fight, a constitutional fight, a legal fight, and on days like this, a street fight. We've got to make the
listen to these
where
people.
it is. Leave
They have gone off the deep end.
Oh, threatening fights in the street, are they? Okay.
Terrible.
Well, only in the insane liberal clown posse world would volunteering to save taxpayers billions of dollars, which is what Musk is doing, could in any way be considered wicked. But Democrats feel that they found their footing, with Vox proclaiming that their anti-Trump resistance may finally be waking up, focused on Musk's methodical and swift disemboweling of federal bureaucracy. Leah Greenberg, a top progressive organizer, has said, if you don't create friction, then the American people don't understand
American
exactly
people better
how
wake
bad
up
and how
and
dangerous
follow
this is.
Donald Trump.
Now, you can expect weeks
J.D.
of
Vance.
AstroTurf activists showing up to
Instead
protect
of
the
this
corruptocrats who are burrowed into
lost soul.
every agency of our government. Your fight,
And another lost
my
soul.
fight, our fight.
Not
and
my
we will
fight,
win
lady.
this fight.
Don't take me
Are
off the
you
cliff.
ready to say no to Elon
I'm
Musk?
saying no to you.
We gotta fight.
And you.
Are we gonna win?
No.
Is this our country?
No.
Shrieking for big government. Well, today it was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which gets its funding via the Federal Reserve. Now, to give you a sense of how partisan that place has become, in December, its chief rushed to file several lawsuits against the payment platform Zelle, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, alleging this amorphous failure to protect consumers is ridiculous. And it amounts to another shakedown of business by anti-capitalist crusaders. That's all it is. Now think of it this way. The same Democrats who caused inflation to skyrocket and who hid Biden's decline, they now want you to think that they care about protecting your bottom line. And as for their sudden concern with the use of executive orders to get things done, they're all worried about that. Now, I don't recall they had any problem when their hero, Barack Obama, flexed his Article 2 powers.
We are not just going to be waiting for legislation in order to make sure that we're providing Americans the kind of help that they need.
Shameful.
I've got a pen.
I made the terrible mistake for voting for him in his first election. Never again.
Orders and take executive actions and administrative actions that move the ball forward.
I got a pen, I got a phone. Well, the press and Democrats loved it, right? Because that was quintessential Obama cool under pressure. And of course, Democrats cheered when Joe Biden used executive orders to wipe away billions in student loan debt. Courts ultimately stepped in to hobble the Biden moves. But Warren and Schumer, remember, they didn't care at all. Back then, they were not only not complaining about the executive orders, they pushed Biden to issue them. And she even put out a press release about it. So Trump right now is just following precedent. He's doing exactly what the Democrats supported for years.
We're actually getting rid of a few programs that are just a waste. Just really a waste.
Now, liberals are up in arms when Trump uses his own executive authority after campaigning and winning on a platform to cut government waste. It's hypocrisy, and it's a hyperbole alert.
What we are witnessing is a constitutional crisis.
This is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced.
Nonsense.
Certainly since Watergate, the president is attempting to seize control of power and for corrupt purposes. This is a red alert moment when this entire country has to understand that our democracy is at risk.
Gracious.
Now, imagine having that guy, Chris Murphy, as your senator. It's my home state of my old home state of Connecticut. It breaks my heart. So your state is sinking, it's bleeding manufacturing jobs due to high taxes in Connecticut and a terrible anti-business climate. And Murphy's answer to all of that is Trump's a threat to democracy. Yeah, it's just a propaganda loop, and we've heard it for years. Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne is laying it on thick, describing Trump with the A word, authoritarian. Do they have amnesia? Do they not recall what happened last time they went down this road?
Trump won't hold autocrats accountable because he wants to be an autocrat himself.
Not only did he win the election,
our CBS poll finds that a majority of Americans, 53%, approve of the job he's doing. That's a better approval number than he ever reached during his first term in the White House.
But, of course, he's more popular than ever. And instead of demanding answers from the irresponsible bureaucrats, what the Democrats do and their media friends is they hassle those who are bringing the waste to light.
Now that we start to find out some of the programs that AID has been funding, if you think about it, sex change operations in Guatemala, LGBTQ programs in Serbia,
the U.S.
this is
government
ridiculous.
does not
This is so
fund
beyond
sex
the pale.
change operations or fund Hamas. You know that, though. But you sit on...
That is not true, Margaret. I couldn't get the Secretary of State. I asked him 3 times to tell me that we were not funding Hamas through AID. He couldn't do it.
These anchors supposed to care about facts at all? Haggerty schooled CBS. Yeah, that's the headline there. Why weren't there investigative teams at CBS, at NBC, ABC, all the networks? Why weren't they uncovering the waste that Musk has found? Aren't there things called FOIA requests? Don't they care? And don't Democrats also want to be known as good stewards of the taxpayer money? Or do they think they can grow their base, improve their appeal to young and minority voters by being the protectors of the bureaucracy, of DEI, of climate change giveaways? That's going to grow your party? Look, no one seriously thinks Trump and Musk are trying to tear down democracy. No one. But most Americans sure want them to tear down the bureaucracy. And the more evidence of waste that Musk and his team uncovered, the more powerful the argument for a major downsizing of federal spending.
Absolutely.
And this is what Democrats and their media poodles truly fear. They fear an informed electorate, the curtain pulled back, and the corruption exposed. And that's the angle.
Drain the swamp.
And now an unelected Obama judge in Rhode Island must be feeling very full of himself tonight. Because in a ruling issued earlier today, he railed against President Trump and the Doge crew for failing to comply with his order, one judge's order, to unfreeze federal spending. Judge John J. McConnell handed it down after 22 blue states just were up in arms that funding hadn't been restored. Of course, they went for the sympathy play, citing HIV services in the Congo and a public health grant to Namibia. Now, McConnell had ruled previously that the Trump team had overstepped its executive authority by halting the monies. But if one judge, is going to have the power to stop the Trump cleanup crew in its tracks, don't you think we should know a little bit more about him? And yeah, it's as bad as you would imagine. McConnell once served as treasurer of the Rhode Island Democratic State Committee, and he donated more than $100K to liberal Democrats, including to Biden, to Hillary, to the DNC, and a really hefty chunk of cash to the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee. The list goes on and on. So again, this is an unbiased jurist. This is someone who has the power, and keep scrolling, guys, have the power to do what? To issue a nationwide injunction and stop a duly elected president from doing what the voters elected him to do. It is a scandal. Joining me now, Utah Senator Mike Lee of the Judiciary Committee, former Supreme Court law clerk. Senator, in total, more than 40 lawsuits have already been filed against the Trump administration. You and I predicted this. We knew this was coming. And some of the adverse rulings have come even from a few Republican appointees. But I want to focus on this judge in Rhode Island in particular. Should the White House, in your estimation, you've looked at the pleadings, prevail on the merits here?
Yes, I believe the White House will prevail on the merits of this case and of the other cases that are now pending. Look, Laura, it's important to remember this is entirely within the purview of the executive branch. What they're looking to do, Elon Musk and the Doge crew are going in looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, looking to ferret out ways that we can stop this problem that's landed us $36 trillion in debt with no easy way out. So the fact that they're doing this, and they're doing it within what the law allows, this is where Democrats get upset, and they go running to the courts. Having lost in the court of public opinion, having lost elections, they're now going to try their hand at litigating and at picking off a few liberal one-off judges here and there in order to slow the process down. But make no mistake, Laura, we're all going to win. The right side of this is going to prevail. This is just a matter of delay, but we need to keep this delay as brief as possible.
Well, the other issue here, I think, for a lot of Americans are very confused about how a single district court judge in a forum like the First Circuit, which covers a lot of these New England states, can actually grind a president's agenda to a halt. And who ultimately would put an end to this? Would the Supreme Court ultimately rule on this? Unlikely would probably get a law, be able to get a law through Congress, I don't know, ending these national injunctions. But this has got to stop. This is insanity.
Look, one would hope, Laura, when these orders first started coming out a few days ago, I immediately commented on X on my base Mike Lee account that it's probably a moment like this when you go and you seek an extraordinary writ of mandamus. This is a way of stopping abusive action by a district judge midstream. Now, the Court of Appeals could do that. If necessary, they could seek what's called certiorari before judgment to get the whole case expedited in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And I hope and expect that Pam Bondi and her team of lawyers at the Department of Justice will consider all these options, because these judges are out of line. They don't have the authority to go in and commandeer the presidency and undo the election of November 2024.
So you have a Seattle judge, you have a D.C. District Judge, Carl Nichols, who clerked for our former boss, Justice Thomas. You have a Boston judge, you have a Rhode Island judge, you have a couple of old Reagan appointees, you have a judge who came out for transgender inmates, you have another ruling on that was filed on behalf of pregnant illegals on birthright citizenship. So these are coming fast and furious, and the goal here is to just slow it down. So people get demoralized, and I guess they go back to what? Business as usual? I don't think the Trump team is about business as usual.
No, they're not about business as usual at all. That's why I anticipate that these delays will last maybe a few days, hopefully not more than a week or two, because there is no there. What they're trying to do is entirely lawful. It's within the scope of presidential authority, and therefore the authority of what President Trump has asked DOJ to do. We're very lucky that we've got these talented people willing to undertake these efforts on our behalf, and I wish them every success in doing this. In the meantime, I hope and expect the Trump administration's lawyers will push back hard and make sure that these judges don't get in the way, because you're exactly right. They want to delay this, hoping that it'll just go away. We're not going away. The effort's not going to end.
Senator, the First Circuit Court of Appeals, again, we don't want to get too wonky, people watching this like, oh, this is not a continuing legal education course, but the First Circuit Court of Appeals is 5 Democrat appointees, right? That's the appellate point from these district courts' decisions in Boston and Rhode Island. And they're going to go up to the First Circuit. There are no Republicans on the First Circuit now, correct, Mike?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And look, you don't always, you're not always able to predict the outcome based on which president appointed them.
Yeah,
but sometimes you can get a pretty good guess. If they don't get what they need there, I think they should go right along to the Supreme Court and seek the relief there.
Bingo. Senator, so great to have you on tonight. Thank you so much. All right, we have a Fox News alert. At least one person is dead, others injured after 2 private planes collided at the Scottsdale Airport in Arizona. We're going to monitor this story and bring you any breaking updates. And up next, trigger warning for libs. Patriotism is back. I'll explain.
Time to take a break and rest now. Yeah, Dad, you ought to stop filming so much. Bless your heart. You need to go on to bed tonight and let your body heal up. And I'll sneak in there with you, too.